Today I have the honor of talking with Barbara, who is a liver recipient, and Casey, who is a living liver donor. And actually, kind of interesting how I met both of them. So I met Barbara when her daughter Rebecca found one of my TikToks where I was advocating for living donation. I think I was doing like the Wednesday Addams dance and showing my stomach or something ridiculous. But anyway, I met Rebecca, and then met Barbara through her. And then the day of Barbara's surgery, I went to the waiting room to say hi to her family, and I met Alexis, Casey's wife, and then later met Casey in the hospital. Anyway, let's start by having you both introduce yourselves. Barbara, can you just tell us a little bit about who you are, what's important to you?
Sure. I am a retired social worker. I have two beautiful grandchildren and another one on the way. And all of this has happened post-transplant. So thank you, Casey. Things that are important to me, my family, they've always been important to me, but there's some deeper connection going through all that we've been through in the past 3.5 years. So they are my passion. Community, social justice, those are the things that are really important to me. I don't think I'm particularly unique. I think that I'm just a person who wanted to stay alive.
Well, thank you. And Casey, how about you? Who are you?
Well, it's tough to follow up, but I don't think I'm nearly as cool as Barbara. But I am, let's see, I'm from the Northeast originally, so I got a little tough side to me, which I think probably was useful in getting through donation and recovery. But have lived in Colorado now with my wife for 4 years. And currently I'm a student on the healthcare path. I'm still kind of figuring out exactly what direction I want to go with all of that. But yeah, other than that, I'm a hiker, adventurist. Yeah, I like to be out in nature and connecting with the world around me in any way that I can. So.
And how did you two know each other before the whole liver donation thing?
So my best friend lives in Nashville. Her name is Sarah, and Sarah grew up with Sam, and Sam is Barbara's son. So in being best friends with Sarah over the years, when I lived in Nashville at the time, Barbara would come visit Sam, and they were roommates. And so we just kind of met each other here and there over the years.
Okay. And before we get into your stories too much, I'm curious, since the transplant, have the two of you had much opportunity to talk? Have you stayed in contact?
We stay in contact a lot through social media. We have a little group text with our family and Casey and Alexis, and we stay in touch that way. We haven't seen each other very much, but we will soon. Casey and Alexis are very busy, so there isn't that much time, but I hope we'll be seeing them again soon.
Well, Barbara, can we start by hearing a little bit of your story? I know your story is long and complicated, but where did all this start?
Okay, well, this all started in 2020 in March after a plane ride. Alan and I both got COVID. So it's at the very, very beginning, before there were tests, before anybody knew what they were doing. And by early April, I went into the hospital. I thought I was doing okay, but then my pulse ox registered to very low 80s. And so I wasn't doing okay. And I was in the hospital, intubated for 65 days, then and in ICU. I'm very, very sick and close to death, I think 3 times, but I didn't die. I had amazing doctors, and I'm very grateful to them. And one of the things that happened during that coma was that my liver started to fail. And so we knew pretty much immediately after I finally came out of the coma, the transplant might be in the future, whatever that meant. So what that meant to me is, no, not really. So a little bit of denial there. And I got very, very sick. And, there's something called a MELD score that is a measurement for when people are eligible for a transplant. My MELD score was actually very, very low because my symptoms were not rated by the MELD score. So it was pretty clear by February 21, I might have my times mixed up. That's another thing that happens after liver surgery. But it became very clear that I was very sick. My MELD score was too low to qualify for a deceased donor, and that the only way I would live would be with a living donor.
You just described in just a few sentences what must have been a horrific, life-changing experience. And I'm wondering, did you even feel like you had a chance to start to recover from COVID before realizing you would actually need to move forward with a liver transplant?
Yes.
Yeah.
I had several months where I felt like I was finally recovered from COVID. And then things started to get bad again. But we traveled during those months and we enjoyed our family, enjoyed being together. It was a difficult recovery. I couldn't speak. I couldn't walk. All my muscles had atrophied, even my eye muscles, so I couldn't use my eyes very well. I remember standing up for 10 seconds, holding on to something and getting applause. And so it was a very long recovery.
Were you a fairly healthy person prior to being ill with COVID?
Oh, yes. So this just hit us. Alan, my husband, had mostly fatigue and intestinal issues. And then I got the cough, and that was that.
Yeah.
I mean, it just could not resolve. So the only way to keep me alive, and I had to be transferred from hospital to hospital. UC Health accepted me for something called ECMO, which is something you could describe better than me, Rachel, but is essentially a lung and heart bypass machine. So I was on that for 15 days, and I certainly would have died without that machine.
Wow.
And I hear that that's a long time.
It is.
But I don't really know that much about it, except that it saved my life.
Oh. Do doctors know why your liver was affected during this?
It might have been because of ECMO. Might have been because, the ECMO machine recycles all your blood. And there might have been a moment or two when my liver didn't get enough blood. So it started to scar. And once it started to scar, it just kept scarring so that the ducts couldn't work.
Yeah. And so fast forward back to learning that you would need a transplant. When did the idea about living donation come up?
The whole team there, which is fantastic beyond words, I think told me of that possibility from the very beginning. So yeah, I found that very scary because I thought, who would do something like that? Who does that? Of course, I'm looking at two people here who do that, but that was really beyond my scope, beyond anything that I knew about. And so I really didn't think it was possible.
I'm curious, what made it seem scary or like something that someone wouldn't do?
Well, I knew that somebody who wanted to donate a liver would have to undergo surgery and have a recovery and would agree to have part of their liver removed. It's a big deal. It's a big deal to ask that of someone. That's really what it is, more than anything. It's a big deal to make that ask. And I personally couldn't do it. My family did it.
And how did they do it?
They did it, well, through social media, which is how Rebecca met you. How we met Carrie, who's somebody that I only know online. And there's a whole community out there of people connected with social media, but I wouldn't have had any idea as to how to do that. So it was my husband and my kids, particularly Alan and Rebecca, but Sam as well. They just did a blitz.
So, Casey, how did you hear about Barbara needing a liver?
Well, unsurprisingly, social media. So I think it was one of Rebecca's posts that just said, well, I guess I should start by saying I was following Barbara's journey from the moment she got COVID, just because Sarah is my best friend and their families are so tightly intertwined that it was just conversation as everybody was, navigating the early moments of COVID, for somebody that we knew to have it severely. So I knew about the COVID journey and the near death experiences, plural, already. So when Rebecca posted that Barbara needed a liver, I wasn't exactly surprised, although I didn't know that that was always a possibility. It was just, we already knew what her body had been through and survived against the odds. So, but yeah, so it was Rebecca's post that was just like, my mom needs a liver to survive.
And did you start thinking about it immediately, or did you kind of process it for a while, or when did you start to think that maybe you would be interested in donating?
It was immediate. To be honest, like, you read that she needs a liver, in my mind, I assumed everybody who saw the post was reaching out, which turned out to not be the case, but I just assumed that anybody who could help was attempting to help. So in the early stages, you don't think, or I didn't think, that it was likely that I would be the chosen one, but it was an immediate, like, how can I help? I would love to help. And Rebecca gave me info on how to submit my information, my blood type and all that stuff, and kind of get the early stages of the process started.
And did you know it was possible to donate part of your liver prior to this?
So ironically, only like a few weeks prior, I had heard a podcast, and somebody on a podcast, it like just in passing mentioned that they donated their liver and that it regenerated. And it was a very quick, 30-second, 1-minute conversation. And that was the first time I ever knew that you could donate an organ and it could grow back.
So when you started moving forward with the process, when did it start to feel more real, and what was that like for you?
So I did a blood panel, and they make sure that your blood type matches, and I could go forward with donation, made sure that I'm healthy and just basic blood work. And then I knew that the step after that is only one person gets chosen for. So the step after that is you go into the hospital and they do a 2-day evaluation of all things donor related. So when I got the phone call to go forward with the evaluation, that's when it got pretty real, because I knew only one person was doing that. Now, I knew I also, at that stage, my team was extremely clear that you can back out at any point. This is not just because we call you and you do this evaluation does not mean that you have to go forward. It is informational. However, knowing that they would choose the best candidate, and I got the call, I kind of knew at that point it's highly likely.
Right. So how are you feeling emotionally going through this?
That point was the only moment that I felt a little bit of nerves, because it just was the first moment that it got really real. And at that point, prior to the evaluation, there was a lot of information I still didn't have that during the evaluation calmed my fears. But prior to that, I didn't really know the risks and how likely a good outcome is for me or for Barbara at the time. So there was a little bit of nerves. Obviously, some extensive conversations with my wife to make sure she was also on board. Some therapy sessions involved to make sure that, I was in the right headspace in making this decision. But yeah, as we continued the process, everything I learned about donation, I became less and less nervous about it.
Also, a couple of things, Barbara, you looked like maybe you were wanting to say something.
Oh, no. I just look at Casey and I want to cry every time. I just feel so much love and affection for her that all she has to do is speak, and I look emotional. So.
Fair enough. Casey, what's it like to hear her say that?
I mean, I allow her the space to feel how she wants to feel, but it's foreign to me. You know, to me, through the whole process, it's always been a no-brainer. And I certainly didn't go forward with it for any kind of recognition or admiration or anything like that. So it's hard to accept, but you know, I don't know what it's like to be on the other side of the donations.
Right. Well, I carry a piece of you with me every day. And I know it's my liver, but it still feels to me like it's yours, like you're just a part of me. And I'm a gushy person. So I'm just always going to be gushy about it. And you saved my life. And I know it was a no-brainer for you to a point, but for me, it was everything, right? It's just everything. So, yeah. So I'll just probably always be gushy with you and say thank you. And, I annoy my kids all the time. So if I annoy you a little bit, just consider it a compliment.
I can handle it.
Yeah, no, you can.
Well, and Casey, I think I feel similarly to you. It's like, why wouldn't you do this? And I mean, from my perspective, I just feel so lucky that I'm healthy enough. I mean, I would so much rather be on this side than Barbara having to be in your position and needing to ask. And so to me, it just feels like I'm so lucky. Yeah.
I completely agree. And I mean, throughout the process of evaluation and everything, there are certain like just tests that you don't get every year. So like I was able to confirm that like, hey, I am actually extremely healthy, even though I already thought that I was a healthy person, to get confirmation that, yeah, everything looks good. And I'm back to normal. So that was always something on my mind as well, is it's a couple weeks of recovery and then your life goes back to the way it always was. There's nothing that I'm unable to do now that I could do before donation. And I mean, literally nothing in terms of food and exercise and workouts. And I can like everything I was doing prior, I can do now, I guess, except drinking for right now, but that's a very small sacrifice. So
well, and I want to come back to that because I will say it's a little more than a couple weeks of recovery, but we'll get back to that.
okay.
Can you tell us a little bit more detail what the evaluation process was like and what sort of steps you had to go through? You mentioned some therapy to make sure you were thinking about it right. Like what all did you go through?
Yeah, so after I saw the social media post, the first step that I did was I filled out a form online that basically was like, this is how I know Barbara, like just pretty basic information. Then I got a call from my donor coordinator, Jamie. Like she really, really was so helpful in this process. There's not even words. Like she was such a help through this whole thing. So Jamie called me, we got set up for the blood panel that I previously mentioned. Then she had called me again and said, we're going to move forward if you would like to. And then at that point, there was a 2-day outpatient evaluation, which I went into the hospital for, I don't remember, 4 or 5 hours, maybe, for 2 days in a row, and spoke to a bunch of different doctors and psychiatrists, and they walked me through the process physically, like what does surgery look like? What part of your liver are we taking? How much of it? What are the results of that? What are the risks associated with that? Because even though I just got done saying I'm doing great, there are still risks associated with it. And it's not always the case that you're going to come out unscathed. And yeah, and I talked to psychologists and just to make sure that mentally I understood what I was doing and that they wanted to make sure that during the several weeks of recovery that I would not go into a depression and regret my decision. So yeah, it was a long couple days, a lot of information, but extremely helpful in helping me make my decision.
And was there anyone or anything in particular that helped you feel more confident moving forward?
So for me personally, I'm a very like data-driven person. And at some point I was given like a spreadsheet of like percentages of how likely Barbara would survive and I would survive, and what were the chances of me dying and what were the chances of me having a like severely negative result. And so the numbers really, for me, spoke for everything, because I could say, well, this represents the team that's going to be working on me. And if they have a 99% success rate, statistically speaking, it's highly likely that it's going to go up.
And so how did you feel when you got the call that you were approved and they would move you forward if you wanted?
Pretty excited. So Barbara and her family, actually nobody knew that I was going through this evaluation process except like my wife and my sister. I think that was it. And then my best friend, Sarah, but she had to keep the secret. But I didn't want to share the information because it wasn't approved yet. There was a chance of it maybe not, who knows. And I also still had the opportunity to back out. And I wanted to make sure that I was making a completely informed decision before sharing the information, because I knew that sharing the info would have an added pressure of just the excitement of Barbara and her family knowing, that there's a chance. So I waited until I got the call of approval. And then I was like, okay, we can tell them now. So it was actually a very exciting day for me, because I felt like I already knew for a while this is what was going to happen, but I knew that they didn't know. So it was exciting.
So did you get to tell Barbara and her family yourself?
I had the team tell her. I didn't want to, I felt weird because it felt to me personally like I was being some kind of hero, which has been my thing this whole time. That's not how I feel. So I had my team tell her. Yeah.
And so Barbara, tell me what that was like. What was that day like? What was going through your head?
We were actually in Nashville at the time, again, because we live in Colorado, but visiting kids in Nashville. And we remember exactly where we were. We just drove by there. We knew exactly where we pulled over the car. Dr. Burton called and he said, so guess what? We have a liver. And he said, do you know who your donor is? And of course, we had no idea. We didn't know where things were in the process at all. And he said, it's Casey. She's given me permission to tell you. And of course, we cried a lot. And I, after the oh my God, oh my God, oh my God part, we called Casey to thank her so much. And Alexis, because this is not a process on either side that you can really do completely on your own. You have to have support, whatever that looks like for you. So,
and Barbara, who has been your support?
Well, my husband, Alan, has basically, he's taken care of me. There's so many areas since COVID, and then again, certainly since the transplant, where I've not been able to take care of myself. And he's been right by my side, doing everything. And my children, Rebecca and Sam, there. Sam's wife, Amanda, and Rebecca's husband, Brian. They've just been right by my side in such lovely ways. And then friends and community. We're very fortunate to have a very strong community where we live. And everyone's just been right by my side.
And I've only gotten to know you a little bit, but am I correct in sensing that prior to COVID and prior to this, you were a very independent woman, and as you said, also very healthy? And
yes.
I imagine all of this, though it's wonderful to have a support system, I would imagine that all of this has also been incredibly difficult to need to rely on that support system, let alone ask someone to
Well,
give part of their liver.
yes. And right, there's that part. And then there's needing to ask for help, sometimes for very simple things. I've not driven on the highway yet, and I realize that I'm avoiding that, although there's no reason really to avoid it. At first there was. At first I couldn't drive for several months. I mean, that's part of, that going in. In fact, you're so well trained. I was so well trained by the time I got to the transplant that I had a pretty good knowledge of everything that was going to happen, So, yes, asking for help is hard. Being the helper, my goodness, Alan had no time to himself. At first, he took care of me, very loving, and he knew I would get better. We didn't know that I would get better from COVID, and we knew I would get better from this, and I am getting better. It's been 6 months, right, Casey?
Mm-hmm.
It's been 6 months, and they've told me that after 3 months, I should be able to do everything, which is true, certainly by the 4th month. But that full recovery takes a year, and I've not been patient with that. But it's true. So, and I've been able to rely on friends for help if I've needed rides somewhere, things like that.
And Casey, how about your support system? What did your wife, Alexis, think of all this?
So she was definitely a little more nervous than I was going into all of it, going into surgery and everything, which rightly so. If the roles were reversed, I'm sure I would be a complete nervous wreck because you don't know what's going to happen in there. But then after surgery, I mean, she's a nurse, so I knew I was going to be taken care of. And she really came through. And to Barbara's point, I mean, the first couple weeks, I couldn't do anything. Like she was brushing my hair, bathing me, toweling me off, putting my pants on. Like I was unable to do anything. And on top of that, I was in a lot of pain. So I couldn't get comfortable. And so then there's this added layer of just simply me being cranky that I can't find a position that I'm comfortable in. And she can't help me. She's building me these little pillow forts and everything to try to help. And I'm just uncomfortable. So she was just a huge support. And, I couldn't make myself food. Anything. And I needed to take walks every day because that helps you heal and also gets me out of the house for a couple minutes. And I couldn't do that on my own. So she really was like everything I needed, she had to do for me. If I was sitting on the couch and dropped my phone, I needed to call her to pick up my phone. It was tough for me, but she was just such a huge support throughout the whole thing. So I could not imagine going through it without that level of support.
Well, and I want to come back and talk a little bit more specifically about recovery, but I'm curious for both of you what it was like the day of surgery. And I'm just remembering myself the day of surgery. I was absolutely terrified and I was extremely excited at the same time. And I remember Dr. Pomfret was my surgeon and she came in and she put her hand on my shoulder and she said, "Do you have any questions?" And my only question was, "Can you take pictures, please?" And she did. So I'm curious, first, Casey, what you felt, and then we'll ask Barbara, but what was the morning of surgery like?
So for me, it was kind of a whirlwind leading up to surgery because I was still in school. So the day before surgery, I had my organic chemistry final. So I wasn't really allowing myself to focus on surgery because I was just focusing on, which is scarier than surgery, by the way. So the morning of surgery is also kind of a whirlwind. You have to wake up extremely early. There's some rules around bathing yourself and certain types of soap and towels and all the things to make sure that your skin is as clean as possible and no bacteria. And so you just have a laundry list of things to do in the morning. So I was just waking up and following my directions, and we got to the hospital. And once you're in the hospital, that's also craziness. Just people coming in and taking your vitals and putting in different IVs, and lots of doctors and nurses coming and checking on you and getting you ready. So I was strangely very calm. I think I was more excited than anything else, because I was like, let's just get this over with. Like, let's get to the recovery part. And the anticipation and the waiting sometimes is like more nerve-wracking than anything else. So I was excited to just like, let's do it. Like, I know I'm doing it, so let's get it done, and let's hopefully get Barbara healthy. I was anticipating like what her recovery might be, and just hopeful that, everything would turn out well.
And Barbara, what did you feel like going into surgery? What was going through your head?
I was excited. I was really sick by that point. I had many very uncomfortable and scary symptoms of liver disease. I had varices in my esophagus that were bleeding. Varices are like in your esophagus, basically, that the vessels swell. And so I was having endoscopies very often in order to treat that. I had unbearable itching, and it's not itching like with a mosquito bite. It's itching from the inside. So you can scratch all you want, but it doesn't make any difference. And I had hepatic encephalopathy because my body could not absorb the ammonia, that my liver wasn't absorbing it. It wasn't cleaning it out, I guess. And so the ammonia goes to your brain. And so I had a lot of fogginess and just weirdness. And my family didn't tell me how bad it was. So I knew it was bad, but apparently it was much, much worse. And so I was excited to just get it over with and feel better. And the team, Dr. Pompicelli's team, was so together, such a tight team, and they made me feel safe. And it was the first time in a long time that I actually felt safe, that things weren't going to start bleeding and choke me or whatever. So I was feeling okay. I'm always a little nervous around IVs because I don't have wonderful veins. They're less wonderful now, but we still manage. So I was looking forward to it.
Well, and just to make sure I understood you correctly, you're saying that going into surgery, you actually felt more of a sense of security than you had in a long time.
Yes, than I'd had in a long time, because my symptoms were scary, the varices in particular. You really need to keep them from bleeding. And it's always hard to tell when they're going to bleed. So I was happy to get that behind me. And, I was right, because as soon as I woke up, not that it wasn't painful, because of course there's pain after surgery, but those symptoms were gone. The encephalopathy takes a little bit longer, and it's not quite gone yet, but it's certainly not like it was. I mean, immediately it was not like it was pre-surgery, pre-transplant. And the rest of the symptoms, I woke up and they weren't there. I noticed right away that they just were no longer there. So any discomfort felt very well worth it.
And when you say they weren't there, what wasn't there?
Oh, sorry. Yeah, the itching.
Okay.
I definitely had more clarity, even as I was still coming out of anesthesia. And the varices were gone. So, the things that were most difficult for me were not occurring after surgery, completely remedied.
Wow.
And then there's other stuff after surgery that you're dealing with, but it wasn't that. And so I knew even more that I was going to be okay.
Well, and Casey, I think one of the things you and I have in common is that we both donated to an adult, which means we donated the right lobe of our liver, which is a bigger surgery than if you were to donate the left lateral segment or the left lobe. And I'm curious, do you know what percentage of your liver you donated to Barbara?
I believe it was 55%.
Okay.
I think
okay.
Okay. I thought it was 55 or 55.5, but I don't know.
Maybe
55.5. More than half. More than half.
More than half. Yeah.
Yeah.
So, but what that means is, the liver is incredible in that it regenerates, but because you're having to grow back more than half of your liver, it really that leads to a lot of fatigue and a lot of acute kind of abnormalities in your labs. And I said I was going to come back and call you out on the couple of weeks recovery, because it really is longer than that. And so I'm curious if you could tell us, Casey, what it was like for you waking up from surgery, and then a little bit about more specifics of the recovery process.
Yeah. So waking up from surgery, I felt fine because I was still very drugged up and still coming off of the anesthesia. So I would say like it was about the first 2 days. I couldn't really physically move that much, although they had me moving. They came in and they got me moving, I think in like maybe 12 hours, less than 24 hours after surgery, which I thought was crazy, but we did it. But yeah, so the first couple of days, as I was still heavily drugged up, I felt okay. And then after, I think it was like the third day, I kind of really hit a point where where the anesthesia had completely worn off, and they were kind of weaning me, I guess, onto less potent drugs. And then there's like a little bit of a period of figuring out dosage, right? And that's kind of just a trial and error type of thing while you're in the hospital, and just having to say, hey, I need more, I'm not doing great, or whatever. So then a couple days in the hospital were rough and slow, and eating ice chips and boring, and can't sleep that great. But then I was home after 5 days. So very short stint in the hospital. And once I got home, everything got better and everything got worse because you're just a little less comfortable. Shockingly, the hospital beds are actually more comfortable than laying in your own bed or on the couch or on a chair or whatever you have at your house. It's just not as conducive to recovery. But I was home. I had my dogs. I had the comfort of my own shower. You don't have nurses and doctors coming in and checking vitals, so you have a bit better of a chance of sleeping. But yeah, so first 2 weeks were pretty painful and uncomfortable. And then once I hit the 2-week mark, there was significant change in the positive direction. And I remember I would say I felt every day from the day of surgery, I felt like I was getting like 2% better. Like it was minimal, but every single day I could tell that I was a little bit better and healthier than the previous day.
And so when would you say you started to feel back to like normal levels of energy and no pain?
So the 1 month mark for me was a huge turning point. I wouldn't say I was back to normal, but I felt like I was able to like do things for myself, like I could bathe myself again and those types of things. I still was on pretty heavy restrictions just because you can't lift things over a certain weight because you're still healing and your incision is still healing and all that fun stuff. But the 1 month mark was a huge turning point, and I was starting to sleep like 6 hours through the night, which was just huge after not being able to sleep. But then 3 months, I would say, after the 3-month mark, I was pretty much 100%. So the doctors gave me a 12-week timeline of restrictions. And then I knew at the 12-week mark, technically my restrictions were lifted. So at the 12 weeks, I took my dog and we went and climbed a 14er to celebrate. And it was hard, but I was able to hike for whatever it was, 7 hours, and very physical. So just such a huge change in a very short amount of time.
That's impressive. I did not climb a 14 or 3 months after donating, but I remember I did push myself. I wanted to get back to work, and I went back to work part-time from home at 4 weeks. But I was pretty tired and I was kind of irritable and I had to kind of like watch myself. So I, wasn't too irritable at work. But I remember after surgery wanting, almost feeling like this was a motivation to be even healthier, right? To like, knowing what my body was capable of made me want to push it even farther. And so, actually since surgery, I've run 2 half marathons, and I was never a runner before surgery. So, if anything, it's just made me want to be healthier.
Yeah, I agree. It is an amazing thing to experience your own body going through it, because you really do come out on the other end feeling like there's nothing that my body can't endure. Like
Right.
it really feels like I could do anything if I wanted to. Yeah.
Right. Well, I have, I think, a final question for both of you. Well, it's a 2-part question, and I guess we'll start with you, Barbara. I want to know kind of what you've learned about yourself through this process, and how it's changed you as a person.
Wow, that's such a good question, and it's also hard to answer. Well, first of all, being the recipient of such an enormous kindness, there are no words to describe how that feels. I've told Casey a million times how grateful I am. And we've joked, like, what do you say? Well, thanks. Here's a gift card to Target. It's like there are no words to really understand and take that in. It's profound. Spiritually, I've always had an active spiritual life. I have felt much more connected to the earth in a way that it's not that I didn't like the earth and surroundings beforehand. Of course I did, but this feels like a physical connection to all living things. And it's where I'm drawn spiritually, which is completely new. I have ups and downs. And, part of it, I thought I really wasn't getting better. I wasn't getting better fast enough, which I know I'm told everybody feels, except, of course, Casey, who could climb a 14er at, 3 months. But for recipients, they tell you it's a long process. But I felt like I wasn't making enough progress. And then I came here to Nashville at a lower altitude. And, I can run up and down the block. So I realized that that's probably less to do with my recovery and more to do with COVID, probably. So how else did it change me? Made me focus even more so on my family and friends, close friends. And like I said, ups and downs, there's a deep connection to all of those things. And also, I've faced my own death now several times. And so that's always on my mind as well. I think about that a lot. I think about what that means, what it means to be alive, what it means to be not alive, all of that. And it occupies my thoughts as opposed to fleeting ideas.
It's not something that has the option of living in the background for you anymore.
Right, exactly. Thank you for reframing that. That's exactly right.
And how about you, Casey?
Well, like I briefly mentioned, I definitely feel like I'm physically capable of doing anything. The body is so unbelievable. My body is so unbelievable to experience that, and to be inside of this body as I regrew an organ was just unbelievable. And so, yeah, physically, I feel like anything I want to do, I can do. I'm not a runner, so I don't see myself doing half marathon anytime soon. But if I wanted to do it, I'm pretty sure I could. But yeah, I think that just physically and just like trusting my body and knowing that I'm a healthy person, it also reminds me to trust my body if something feels off. I think as a society, especially as women, like in life, you're kind of just used to, blowing things off, maybe if something feels off. And I feel like I have a new connection, like soul body connection, that I feel like I can trust more than before. But as far as me as a person, I don't feel like I've really changed. I feel like I'm the same person that I was before, and I would do it again. And I can't do it again, but I would do it again if I could. And I think that, yeah, that I'm just still the same as I was before the surgery and donation.
Well, do either of you have any final thoughts or things we didn't touch on that you want people to know?
I do. I guess I want people who are going to be recipients to know that there are bumps in the road, and you'll be told that very clearly. I was told that. There are bumps in the road. We don't know what yours will be, but there are bumps in the road and we can deal with them. And that is exactly right in recovery. There are bumps in the road, and the team, your team, whatever team you have, can deal with them. And so to not be worried or scared that that might happen. Your team is with you from the beginning until you move to the next team, because you've graduated from the surgical team. So you're not alone in this. You're not alone in this. You have people who really, really know what they're doing. And you can feel safe with that.
How about you, Casey? Anything you would add?
I think I would just say thank you to the doctors, to the teams that have helped us along this way. I don't know who's going to listen to this, but our team, my team specifically, was just unbelievable. The doctors that worked on me were so diligent and careful, and I really felt the whole time that I was being taken care of as if I was a family member, a child, a sister, a sibling, whatever. And I know it's not an easy job. So I just wanted to say thank you so much to everybody who dedicates their life to this work, because it's obviously making a huge difference and literally saving lives. And I couldn't do it. I can't just give Barbara my liver. So
Right.
it's very important that we have these professionals do it. And thank you.
Well, thank you both. It has been a privilege to talk with the two of you, and I've really enjoyed it.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.